She was standing in his office doorway when the words left his mouth. "You're fired. Pack your things and be gone within the hour." Thornton Graves didn't look up from the document spread across his mahogany desk. His pen kept moving across the contract in front of him, signing away millions while discarding a human being in the same breath. Adise Nwachukwu stood frozen, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach before she could stop it. The slight swell beneath her uniform was barely visible, but she knew. She had known for 3 weeks. "Mr. Graves, if you would just let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." His voice was flat. Empty. The voice of a man signing a receipt, not destroying a life. "I know everything. The manipulation. The calculated seduction. The pregnancy you've been hiding." "Calculated?" "Thornton, please. That's Mr. Graves." Now he looked up, and his eyes were ice. Whatever warmth she had seen in those late nights, whatever tenderness had passed between them in the darkness of his bedroom, it was gone. Erased. As if it had never existed at all. "I don't know what you were hoping for. Marriage, perhaps. A settlement large enough to secure your future. But you miscalculated." Adise felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "I never wanted your money." Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you. I was going to tell you about the baby, I was just waiting for." "For what? The optimal moment to make your demands?" He pushed a manila envelope across the desk. "I have photographs. Records. Evidence of exactly what you've been doing." "Evidence of what?" "Of caring about you. Of holding you when you cried about your mother." Something flickered in his expression. Just for a moment. Then it was gone, replaced by stone. "You'll receive 1 month's severance. If you attempt to contact me, if you speak to the press, if you make any claims regarding paternity, my legal team will respond appropriately." "Paternity?" The word came out strangled. "You think I would lie about? We're done here." He turned his back to her. Faced the window. 78 floors above Chicago, the city sprawled beneath him like something he owned. Adise stood in the doorway, waiting. For him to turn around. For him to apologize. For him to show any sign of the man she had fallen in love with over the past 6 months. He didn't move. She walked away. Down the hallway. Past the kitchen where she had made him tea at 3 in the morning when he couldn't sleep. Past the living room where they had sat together watching the sunrise, his head in her lap, his defenses finally lowered. She collected her things in silence. 2 years of her life in this penthouse, reduced to a small bag she could carry with one hand. At the elevator, she paused. Turned back one final time. The hallway was empty. The doors closed, and she descended alone. But you need to understand how they got here. How a man became so armored that he could fire a pregnant woman without looking at her face. How a woman fell in love with someone hidden behind walls so high she couldn't see the danger until it was too late. This story begins long before that office. Long before the penthouse, the empire, the billions. It begins in a place where money was the difference between eating and starving, between safety and violence, between hope and despair. Thornton Graves learned early that poverty was not just an absence of money. It was an absence of protection. He was born in downstate Illinois, in a town small enough that everyone knew everyone's business and no one did anything about it. His father, Wendell Graves, worked at the grain elevator when he was sober and drank away whatever he earned when he wasn't. His mother, Vivian, cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the north side of town, the doctors, the lawyers, the people who lived in homes with more bathrooms than the Graves family had rooms. Thornton was 7 years old the first time his father hit his mother. He remembered the sound more than the image. The crack of an open palm against flesh. His mother's sharp intake of breath. The way the kitchen went silent afterward, as if the air itself was afraid to move. He remembered hiding under his bed, pressing his hands against his ears, trying to make himself small enough to disappear. He remembered his mother finding him there hours later, her eye already swelling, her voice steady despite everything. "It's okay, baby. We're okay." They weren't okay. But she said it anyway. And Thornton learned, in that moment, that words could be used to cover truth. That saying something didn't make it real. The violence came and went like weather. Some weeks were calm. Some weeks were storms. Thornton learned to read the signs, the particular slump of his father's shoulders when he'd been drinking, the tension in the air when bills were due and the money was gone. He learned to be invisible. To take up no space. To need nothing that might draw attention or cost money or provide an excuse. His mother protected him as best she could. She hid grocery money in places Wendell would never think to look, inside the lining of winter coats, taped beneath floorboards, folded into the pages of books Wendell never opened. "This is for you," she would whisper, pressing crumpled bills into Thornton's hands. "For your future. Promise me you'll get out of here. Promise me you'll become someone who never has to be afraid." He promised. He meant it with everything he had. Wendell disappeared when Thornton was 13. Just walked out one morning and never came back. No note. No explanation. No forwarding address. Thornton felt nothing. Not relief. Not grief. Just a cold, hollow space where feeling should have been. That hollowness became useful. He discovered that when you didn't feel things, you couldn't be hurt by them. When you didn't need people, they couldn't disappoint you. When you didn't love anything, you had nothing to lose. He worked 3 jobs through high school. Delivered newspapers before dawn, stocked shelves after classes, bussed tables on weekends. He graduated valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Northwestern, and left his hometown without looking back. In college, he discovered his gift. It wasn't just intelligence, though he had that. It wasn't just work ethic, though he had that too. His real gift was for seeing through people. Understanding what they wanted, what they feared, what they would sacrifice to get one and avoid the other. He could read a negotiation the way his mother had read fabric, finding the hidden seams, knowing exactly where to apply pressure to make something give. By 25, he had made his first $1 million. By 30, his first $100 million. By 42, he had built Graves Industries into a real estate empire spanning 3 continents, with holdings worth more than some small countries. He was untouchable. Unreachable. Exactly what he had always wanted to become. But the armor that protected him had also imprisoned him. The hollowness that saved him as a child had become a permanent condition. He had colleagues, not friends. Transactions, not relationships. A penthouse that cost more than his childhood town was worth, and he slept there alone every night, surrounded by silence and the distant lights of a city that belonged to him in pieces. His mother still lived in Illinois, not in the old house, which Thornton had bought and demolished years ago, but in a modest home outside Chicago that she had refused to let him upgrade. "I don't need a mansion, Thornton," she would say, her voice carrying the stubborn warmth he remembered from childhood. "I need a home. This is enough." He visited her every Sunday. The one appointment he never cancelled. He sat in her small kitchen and drank her weak coffee and listened to her talk about the garden, the neighbors, the church she had joined. He didn't know how to love her properly. Didn't know how to show her what she meant to him. The words always got stuck somewhere between his chest and his throat, trapped behind walls he had built so long ago he didn't remember how to take them down. But he showed up. Every Sunday. Year after year. He told himself it was enough. If you're already sensing the weight of what's building here, make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. This man's walls are about to meet the one person who can see through them. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when everything he's built starts to crack. Adeez Nwachukwu arrived in America with $200, one suitcase, and a dream that felt increasingly impossible with each passing year. She had grown up in Lagos, in a neighborhood called Surulere, where the streets were loud with hawkers and the air smelled of suya grilling on corner braziers. Her father taught mathematics at the local secondary school. Her mother sold fabric in the Balogun market, coming home each night with her feet swollen and her voice hoarse from bargaining. They weren't poor, not by Nigerian standards. But they weren't wealthy either. And when Adeez's father died suddenly, a heart attack at 52, no warning, no goodbye, the family's careful stability collapsed. Her mother tried to keep the fabric business going, but grief made her careless. Bad deals. Stolen inventory. Debts that accumulated faster than she could pay them. Adeez was 19 when her cousin Ngozi called from Chicago with an offer. Come to America. Work hard. Send money home. There were opportunities here, Ngozi promised. Cleaning jobs that paid more in a week than her mother made in a month. She left Lagos on a cold February morning, her mother weeping at the airport, her own eyes dry with the determination that would become her defining characteristic. The opportunities were real, but they came wrapped in struggle. The cleaning jobs paid well by Nigerian standards, but Chicago was expensive. Her visa required constant attention. Her English, though fluent, marked her as foreign in ways that made some employers dismissive and others suspicious. She enrolled in nursing school at a community college, attending classes at night after working all day. She studied on buses, in laundromat waiting rooms, during her 15-minute lunch breaks at jobs where no one bothered to learn her name. The job at the Graves penthouse came through an agency that supplied staff to wealthy households. The pay was generous. More than she'd made anywhere else. The work was straightforward. The owner was almost never there. She cleaned. She organized. She maintained the pristine perfection of a home that nobody seemed to live in. And she saved every extra dollar toward the degree that was finally, after 6 years, within reach. Thornton Graves was a ghost to her during those first 2 years. He passed through the penthouse at odd hours, his mind clearly elsewhere, his eyes sliding over her like she was part of the furniture. They exchanged perhaps 10 words a month, none of them memorable. She didn't take it personally. She had cleaned for wealthy people before, and she understood the particular blindness that money could create. The way it made some people unable to see the humanity in those who served them. She did her job. She stayed invisible. She counted down the months until graduation. Then, on a night that would redirect the entire course of her life, something shifted. She found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m. Adeez had come down for water, unable to sleep in the small staff quarters on the lower floor of the penthouse. She expected the kitchen to be empty, as it always was at this hour. Instead, she found Thornton Graves sitting at the marble counter in the dark, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him, his shoulders carrying a weight she had never seen him show in daylight. She should have backed away. Should have pretended she hadn't seen him. Mr. Graves? Is everything all right? He looked up, and for a moment, his mask slipped. She saw exhaustion. She saw grief so raw it took her breath away. She saw a man who had everything and was still, somehow, completely alone. My mother is sick. His voice was flat, disconnected from the words. The doctors found something. They're running tests, but they already know what it is. I can see it in how they talk to me. Adeez stood in the doorway, uncertain. This was not her place. This was not her business. Every professional instinct told her to offer brief condolences and disappear. Instead, she crossed the kitchen and sat down across from him, close enough to be present, far enough to be appropriate. I'm sorry. That must be very frightening. I don't get frightened. The words were automatic, a reflex. Then something cracked in his expression. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to. He stopped, his jaw working. She's the only person who ever believed in me when I was nothing. And I can't fix this. I can't buy my way out. I can't negotiate with cancer. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. He stared at his whiskey glass as if wondering how those words had escaped. My grandmother raised me, Adiz said quietly. After my father died. She was everything to me. Teacher, protector, friend. When she got sick, I was so angry. At God, at the doctors, at myself for being so far away that I couldn't hold her hand. Thornton looked at her. Really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since she'd started working here. What happened to her? She passed. 4 years ago. But she knew I was in America, building a life. She knew I would make something of myself. Adiz paused. She told me once that love doesn't end when people leave us. It just changes form. Becomes something we carry instead of something we share. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Just present. You should get some sleep, Mr. Graves. Whatever comes, you'll face it better rested. She stood to leave. His voice stopped her. Adiz. She turned, surprised he knew her name. Thank you. For not pretending this conversation didn't happen. Of course. She went back to her quarters. She didn't sleep for hours. Something had changed. Something that couldn't be unchanged. They didn't speak about that night directly. But walls had thinned. Thornton began acknowledging her presence when he passed through the penthouse. A nod. A brief word. Questions that went beyond the professional. How were her classes going? When did she expect to graduate? What kind of nursing did she hope to practice? She found herself answering honestly, without the careful performance that serving wealthy people usually required. She learned things about him that didn't match his reputation. The scholarship fund he supported anonymously for first-generation college students. The Sunday visits to his mother that he never missed. The single photograph in his study drawer. Him and Vivian standing outside their old house, both of them smiling despite the poverty evident in every detail of the image. He wasn't the machine the business world described. He was something more complicated. Something wounded that had grown armor to survive. She understood wounded. She understood armor. The first time they crossed the line, it was late. A shared bottle of wine after a day when his mother's treatment had failed again and he had nobody to talk to. A conversation that went too deep, too honest, too far. One moment they were talking. The next moment his hands were in her hair and her back was against the wall, and every reason this was wrong dissolved into the overwhelming need to be touched by someone who actually saw her. It became a pattern. Always at night. Always when the world was asleep and the penthouse was their private universe. They never discussed what it meant. Never defined it. Never acknowledged during daylight hours that it was happening at all. Adiz knew it couldn't last. She was risking everything, her job, her visa situation, her carefully constructed path to a better life. But she couldn't stop. Because in those stolen hours, Thornton became someone else. Someone who held her like she mattered. Who asked about her dreams like they were important. Who fell asleep with his face buried in her neck as if she were the safest place he had ever known. She fell in love with that man. The hidden one. The one nobody else got to see. She didn't realize until too late that love and safety were not the same thing. Now that you've seen how they came together, I need you to understand, this is where everything starts to fracture. The secret she's carrying. The lies someone is building against her. The walls about to slam back into place. If you're invested in their story, make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. What comes next will break your heart before it heals it. The pregnancy announced itself at the worst possible moment. Adiz missed her period in October, when the leaves were turning and Vivian Graves had just been admitted to the hospital for a complication that left the doctors speaking in careful, measured tones. She told herself it was stress. The body responding to pressure, throwing off its rhythms. Nothing to worry about. When she missed the second month, she bought a test from a pharmacy 3 neighborhoods away, where no one would recognize her. She took it in the bathroom of a coffee shop, her hands trembling, her heart pounding against her ribs. 2 lines. Unmistakable. She sat on the floor of that bathroom for 20 minutes, crying silently, trying to understand what this meant for everything she had built. She was carrying Thornton Graves' child. The man who had held her in the darkness, who had whispered things against her skin that made her believe they had a future, she was carrying his baby. And she had no idea how he would react. Logic said she should tell him immediately. This affected both of them. He had a right to know. But Thornton was drowning. His mother's treatment was failing. The specialists were using phrases like quality of life and realistic expectations. He came home from hospital visits with his face carved from stone, his eyes hollow, his capacity for additional stress clearly non-existent. Adiz made a decision. She would wait. Just a few weeks. Just until Vivian's condition stabilized, until Thornton emerged from the crisis consuming him. Then she would tell him everything, and they would figure out together what came next. It was a reasonable decision. A compassionate one. It was also a mistake. Clement Graves had been watching for 2 years. Thornton's uncle was 63 years old, silver-haired, immaculately dressed, and rotting with resentment beneath his polished exterior. He had joined Graves Industries when Thornton was still making his first million, had served as chief operating officer for 15 years, and had watched his nephew accumulate wealth and power that should, by all rights, have been his. He was older. More experienced. More connected to the old money networks that still controlled much of Chicago's real estate landscape. But Thornton had the vision. The ruthlessness. The willingness to destroy competitors that Clement found distasteful but undeniably effective. Gathered information. Cultivated relationships on the board. Positioned himself for the moment when Thornton would stumble, when the empire would need steadier hands, when the nephew would finally need the uncle more than the reverse. The maid was an unexpected gift. Clement had first noticed her at a company gala 2 years prior, a charity event where she had been working coat check. A minor collision with a server had resulted in champagne on his suit, and he had grabbed her wrist in anger before Thornton intervened. The humiliation of being corrected by his nephew, in public, over a servant, that had lingered. Festered. He started paying attention after that. Hired a private investigator to run background on the household staff. Learned that Adiz Nwachukwu was Nigerian, here on a work visa, sending money home to support her widowed mother. Learned that she was enrolled in nursing school, that she had no family connections in America beyond a distant cousin, that she was vulnerable in all the ways that made people easy to destroy. He filed the information away and waited. When the investigators' photographs arrived, showing Adiz entering Thornton's private quarters at night, leaving in the morning, a pattern repeated over months, Clement felt something close to joy. When the medical records followed, obtained through means he preferred not to examine too closely, showing a positive pregnancy test dated 3 weeks prior, he knew he had won. He waited for the perfect moment. A day when Thornton was already reeling from his mother's latest setback. A morning before a board meeting where Clement was making another play for expanded authority. He appeared in Thornton's office doorway with the manila envelope and a face arranged in careful sympathy. "I thought you should know," he said, setting the envelope on the desk. "Before the board meeting. In case anyone thinks to ask questions about your judgment." Thornton opened the envelope. Clement watched his nephew's face as he examined the photographs, the medical records, the timeline that painted such a damning picture. The maid, Thornton. Really? Clement shook his head with theatrical disappointment. I understand the appeal of convenience, but surely you can see how this looks. The head of Graves Industries, involved with the help. Getting her pregnant. A pause, weighted with implication. Unless, of course, the child isn't yours at all. Perhaps this is simply a case of entrapment. A clever immigrant seeing an opportunity to secure her future permanently. Something shuddered behind Thornton's eyes. The warmth that had been growing there over recent months, the softness that Clement had observed with concern. It disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation that had built the empire. I'll handle it. See that you do. The board meets in 3 hours. I'd hate for this to become a topic of discussion. Clement left the office satisfied. He had planted the seed perfectly, framing Adiz as a manipulator, emphasizing her immigrant status, suggesting that any claim she made about the baby's paternity was suspect. Thornton would do the rest himself. His nephew's armor had never truly softened, Clement knew. It had only been waiting for a reason to slam back into place. Thornton sat alone with the photographs after his uncle left. His mind, usually so quick, had gone completely blank. He stared at images of Adiz entering his bedroom, leaving in the morning, her face soft in ways that surveillance cameras had no right to capture. He stared at the medical records. The positive pregnancy test. The date that proved she had known for 3 weeks without telling him. 3 weeks. 21 days of lying beside him, of holding him when he broke down about his mother, of saying nothing about the child growing inside her. Why the silence? What was she waiting for? What was she planning? His uncle's words echoed in his mind. Entrapment. Manipulation. Securing her future. Thornton thought about his childhood. The poverty. The violence. The way people had looked at him when he had nothing. Like he was less than human, like he deserved whatever suffering came his way. He thought about every person who had tried to use him since he'd become wealthy. The business partners who smiled while stealing. The women who appeared in his life with strategic timing and transparent motives. The endless parade of people who saw him as a resource to be extracted rather than a person to be known. Adiz had seemed different. She had seemed real. But she had lied. She had hidden something enormous from him. She had made him vulnerable without his consent. And vulnerability, Thornton had learned long ago, was just another word for weakness. Weakness got you hurt. Weakness got you destroyed. His armor slammed back into place with the force of a vault door ceiling. He picked up the phone and asked his assistant to send Adiz to his office. She knew something was wrong the moment she entered. His face was granite. His eyes were ice. The man who had held her last night, who had whispered her name against her hair, who had fallen asleep with his hand resting on her hip, that man was gone. Replaced by someone she barely recognized. How long have you known you were pregnant? The question hit her like a physical blow. Her hand moved to her stomach before she could stop it. Thornton, I can explain. How long? 3 weeks. I was going to tell you, I was just waiting for the right. For what? For the optimal moment to leverage this into a payout? She stared at him, not understanding. What are you talking about? I know everything, Adiz. He pushed the manila envelope across the desk. The surveillance. The timeline. The calculated seduction of a vulnerable target. She looked at the photographs spilling from the envelope. Pictures of her. Pictures of them. Medical records she had never shared with anyone. How did you? Who gave you these? Does it matter? The facts speak for themselves. His voice was utterly flat, utterly devoid of the warmth she had found there. I don't know what you were hoping for. Marriage, perhaps. A settlement large enough to secure your immigration status permanently. But you miscalculated. I don't want your money. Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. I never wanted your money. I love you. Don't. The word cut like a blade. Whatever you think happened between us, whatever you convinced yourself this was, it was nothing. A temporary lapse in judgment on my part, exploited by someone I should never have trusted. How can you say that? She was sobbing now, her composure shattered. After everything we shared? After all the nights you held me and told me things you've never told anyone? You're fired. He turned toward the window, unable to look at her. Pack your things and be gone within the hour. You'll receive 1 month's severance. If you attempt to contact me, if you speak to the press, if you make any claims regarding paternity. This is your child, Thornton. Your child is growing inside me. So you claim. The words hung in the air between them. The accusation beneath them, that she would lie about something so fundamental, that she would trap him with another man's baby, was so vile that Adiz couldn't breathe. You don't believe me. I don't believe anyone. That's how I've survived. He still wouldn't look at her. We're done here. She stood in the doorway, waiting for him to turn around. To apologize. To show any sign of the man she had loved. He remained at the window. His back to her. His silence absolute. She walked away. Down the hallway. Past all the places where they had been happy. Into the elevator that would carry her away from everything. The doors closed. She pressed her hand against her stomach, against the child who would never know its father, and let herself collapse against the wall. The descent took 45 seconds. By the time the doors opened again, Adiz had wiped her face, straightened her spine, and made a decision. She would survive this. She had survived worse. She walked out of the Graves Industries building and didn't look back. Thornton stood at the window for a long time after she left. He told himself he felt nothing. The hollowness was familiar, even comfortable. This was who he was. Who he had always been. The version of himself that had held Adiz in the darkness, that had whispered confessions against her skin, that had been an aberration. A temporary malfunction. Now he was fixed. He went to the board meeting. Delivered a flawless presentation. Watched his uncle's face fall as the power play failed once again. He visited his mother that evening. Sat in her hospital room and held her hand and told her nothing about what had happened. He went home to the penthouse, which was spotless and empty and exactly as it should be. He poured himself a whiskey and stood at the window where he had stood that morning, looking out at a city that belonged to him in pieces. He told himself he had made the right decision. Protected himself. Eliminated a threat. He told himself the ache in his chest was nothing. Just indigestion. Just exhaustion. He told himself he didn't miss her. He told himself a lot of things, in those first days. He repeated them like prayers until they started to feel true. But somewhere beneath the armor, beneath the walls, beneath all the defenses he had spent a lifetime building, something was dying. Something that had only recently learned to live. He killed it because killing it was easier than losing it. He would learn, eventually, what that choice had cost him. What truth had been buried beneath the lies he had chosen to believe. But that learning was still months away. For now, there was only the silence of the penthouse, and the cold comfort of being untouchable, and the slow fade of everything that had briefly made him human. The first month was the hardest. Adiz found a room in Pilsen, renting from a Dominican woman named Esperanza who asked no questions and accepted cash. The room was small, barely larger than a closet. But it had a lock on the door and a window that faced east, catching the morning light. She found work at a hotel near O'Hare, cleaning rooms for travelers who never looked at her face. The pay was less than half what she had earned at the penthouse. The hours were longer. The supervisors were indifferent at best, cruel at worst. She worked double shifts whenever they were offered. Ate cheap food from corner stores. Visited the free clinic for prenatal care, waiting in lines with other women whose circumstances had brought them to this place of last resort. The baby grew despite everything. Despite the stress, the exhaustion, the grief that sat in her chest like a stone. She felt the first flutters of movement at 16 weeks, alone in her rented room, her hand pressed against her stomach as tears streamed down her face. She didn't try to contact Thornton. What was there to say? He had made his position clear. He believed she was a manipulator, a gold digger, a scheming immigrant who had seduced him for money. Nothing she said would change his mind when his mind was already made up. She told no one about the father. When co-workers at the hotel asked about her situation, she said only that she was alone. When the nurses at the clinic asked about paternity for their forms, she left the space blank. The silence was a choice. A boundary. A small piece of dignity she could still control. She focused on survival. On the baby. On putting one foot in front of the other until the path forward became clear. She didn't know that the path would lead her back to him in ways she never could have predicted. Thornton threw himself into work with a ferocity that alarmed even his most dedicated employees. Deals closed. Competitors fell. The empire expanded into markets that analysts had deemed impossible. From the outside, he was more successful than ever, the untouchable billionaire whose golden touch turned everything to profit. Inside, he was hollow. The penthouse felt different now. Larger. Emptier. He found himself avoiding certain rooms, the kitchen where she had made him tea, the living room where they had watched sunrises, the bedroom where he had held her and felt, for the first time in his adult life, like he wasn't alone. He told himself it was fine. Told himself he preferred the solitude. Told himself that what had happened with Adiz was a cautionary tale about letting people too close. He almost believed it. His mother's condition continued to deteriorate. The treatments that had shown early promise began to fail. The doctors spoke in careful language about managing expectations, about quality of life, about making the most of whatever time remained. Thornton visited every Sunday, as always. But now the visits carried a weight they hadn't before. Each one might be among the last. Each conversation might be the final chance to say the things that mattered. He couldn't say them. The words stayed lodged in his throat, trapped behind walls he had built so long ago that he no longer remembered how to take them down. "You look tired," Vivian said one Sunday, studying him from her hospital bed with the perception that illness had only sharpened. "You look unhappy." "I'm fine, Mom." "You're lying. You've always been terrible at lying to me." She reached for his hand, her grip weaker than it used to be but still warm. "What happened to that young woman? The one who worked at your penthouse?" Thornton went very still. "What young woman? Don't insult my intelligence." Vivian's eyes were fierce despite her frailty. "The one you mentioned without realizing you were mentioning her. The one whose name you said in your sleep when you fell asleep in this chair last month." "I don't." "Adiz. That was the name." Vivian squeezed his hand. "What happened to her?" "She's gone." "It didn't work out." "Why not?" "She wasn't who I thought she was." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but unyielding. "Or maybe you weren't ready to accept who she actually was. Maybe you saw what you were afraid of instead of what was really there." Thornton pulled his hand away. "You don't know the situation. I know you. I know the walls you've built. I know how quickly you retreat when someone gets too close." She paused. I know that protecting yourself has become more important to you than letting yourself be loved. That's not. Your father did terrible things to us. I know that. I lived it. Vivian's voice dropped. But Thornton, at some point you have to stop punishing everyone for what one person did. At some point you have to let yourself be happy. He left the hospital that afternoon with her words echoing in his mind. He didn't act on them. Didn't change his position. But something had cracked in the armor. A small fissure that would widen with time. If you're following this story, you can feel what's coming. The collision that will change everything. The truth that will shatter the lies. Make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson, because what happens next is the moment this entire story has been building toward. The crisis came without warning. It was a Tuesday in March when Thornton's assistant interrupted a meeting with news that stopped his heart. "Sir, it's your mother. She's been rushed to Northwestern Memorial. A complication with her heart. They're saying it's critical." He doesn't remember leaving the building. Doesn't remember the drive, the traffic, the cold spring rain that slicked the streets and turned everything gray. He remembers running through hospital corridors, demanding answers from nurses who tried to calm him with practiced phrases. He remembers the particular terror of powerlessness, the billions in his account suddenly worthless, his connections and influence meaning nothing in the face of a failing heart and a cancer that had spread too far. The doctor who met him in the cardiac unit was a woman named Dr. Okonkwo. She had kind eyes and a steady voice, and Thornton hated her immediately for both. "Your mother is stable for now, Mr. Graves. But the interaction between her heart condition and the lymphoma has created a complication we weren't anticipating." "What kind of complication?" "She needs blood transfusions. Multiple transfusions, likely ongoing, as the treatment continues. The problem is her blood type." Dr. Okonkwo paused. "AB negative. It's one of the rarest types. Less than 1% of the population carries it. I'll donate. I'm her son. Take whatever you need." "I'm afraid that's not possible." The doctor consulted her tablet. "Your blood type is O positive. It's not compatible for transfusion to an AB negative recipient." Thornton stared at her. "That doesn't make sense. She's my mother. Blood type inheritance is complex. Your father was likely O positive as well, which resulted in your blood type despite your mother's AB negative status." Dr. Okonkwo's voice softened slightly. "I understand this is frustrating. We're reaching out to blood banks and donor registries throughout the region. Reach out to all of them. Nationally. Internationally. I'll pay whatever it costs. We're doing everything we can. But AB negative is genuinely rare. Finding donors who can provide the volume we need, on the timeline we need it." She paused. "I want to be honest with you. This is a significant challenge." The floor tilted beneath Thornton's feet. Everything he had. Every dollar, every resource, every ounce of power he had spent his life accumulating, and he couldn't save his mother. Couldn't even give her his own blood. There must be something else. Some treatment, some alternative. We're exploring every option. I promise you that. Dr. Okonkwo touched his arm briefly, a gesture of compassion that almost broke him. Right now, the best thing you can do is be with her. Let her know she's not alone. He sat with his mother for hours. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her face pale against the hospital pillows, machines beeping their steady rhythms around her. Thornton held her hand and thought about all the time he had wasted. All the Sundays he had spent physically present but emotionally absent. All the words he had never said because saying them felt too vulnerable. "I'm sorry," he whispered, not sure if she could hear him. "I'm sorry I never learned how to show you what you mean to me." Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked at him with perfect clarity. You showed me, she said softly. Every time you came. Every time you kept your promise to be here. Her hand tightened on his weakly. But you're still holding back. Still hiding from the life you could have. Mom. Find her. Her voice was fading, exhaustion pulling her back under. Find the woman. Find out the truth. Before it's too late for both of us. Her eyes closed. Her breathing steadied into sleep. Thornton sat in the dim light of the hospital room, surrounded by the sounds of machines keeping his mother alive, and felt something shift inside him. The armor wasn't protecting him anymore. It was suffocating him. Trapping him in a prison of his own making while everything that mattered slipped away. But he didn't know how to take it off. Didn't know how to be the man his mother was asking him to become. All he could do was sit there, holding her hand, waiting for a miracle he didn't believe in. 3 days passed. The blood bank search continued. Regional supplies were critically low. The National Registry turned up a handful of potential matches, but none who could donate immediately. 1 was pregnant, 1 was recovering from surgery, 2 were medically disqualified for other reasons. Thornton made calls. Offered financial incentives that would have seemed obscene in any other context. Put out appeals through every channel available. Nothing worked. AB negative was simply too rare. And his mother was running out of time. On the 4th day, he was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, unable to eat, unable to think, when his phone rang. The hospital's administrative office. Mr. Graves, this is Patricia Wainwright from Patient Services. We have a situation I need to discuss with you. It's delicate. Whatever it is, just tell me. We've found a potential blood donor. A woman who came into our prenatal clinic today for routine testing. Her blood type came back AB negative, she's healthy, and given that she's pregnant, her blood volume is elevated, she could safely provide what your mother needs. Thornton's heart lurched. Then use her. Pay her whatever she wants. I don't care about cost. That's not the complication, sir. Patricia's voice was careful, measured. The woman's name is Adiz Nwachukwu. According to our records, she was previously employed by you. The world stopped. Thornton's vision tunneled. The cafeteria noise faded to static. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Adiz. Here. In this hospital. She's agreed to donate? She has. She didn't know who the recipient was when she agreed, just that someone urgently needed her blood type and she could help. Patricia paused. Given the history, I thought you should be informed before we proceed. Where is she? In the clinic waiting area on the 3rd floor. But Mr. Graves, I should mention. He was already moving. The phone pressed to his ear, his body carrying him toward the elevator, toward the 3rd floor, toward the woman he had thrown away 6 months ago. Mr. Graves? Are you still there? He hung up without answering. She was sitting in a plastic chair when he found her. The clinic waiting area was small and sparse. A few rows of uncomfortable seating, a television playing muted news, the particular institutional quiet of medical facilities. Adiz sat near the window, a magazine open in her lap, her gaze distant. She looked different. Tired in ways that went beyond physical exhaustion. Obviously pregnant now, her belly curved beneath a simple sweater that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a practical style, and there were shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and relentless worry. She looked like someone who had been surviving. Barely. She looked up when he entered. Her expression cycled through shock, pain, and anger before settling into something carefully neutral. Mr. Graves. The formality hit him like a slap. He deserved it. You're here. I had a prenatal appointment. They mentioned someone urgently needed my blood type. She closed the magazine, her hands steady despite what this encounter must be costing her. I didn't know it was your mother until 5 minutes ago. But you agreed anyway. Even after. Your mother never did anything to hurt me. Her voice was quiet but firm, steel beneath the calm surface. Whatever happened between us, she's innocent. I'm not going to let someone die because her son is a coward who couldn't face the truth. The words landed like blows. Thornton felt each one, felt the accuracy of them in his chest. Adiz, I need to tell you. I'm not interested in what you need to tell me. She stood, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. The gesture was instinctive, automatic. The gesture of a mother already defending her child. I'm going to give blood. I'm going to help save your mother. And then I'm leaving, and you're never going to contact me again. That's the arrangement. Please. Just let me explain. Explain what? That you destroyed my life based on lies? That you called me a gold digger while I was carrying your child? Her composure cracked, tears welling in her eyes. I know all of that, Thornton. I lived it. Every day for the past 6 months, I lived it. He stepped closer. She stepped back. I was wrong. The words came out broken, nothing like the controlled tone he usually employed. About everything. I believed lies because believing them was easier than admitting I was terrified. Terrified of what? Of you. Of what I felt for you. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of helplessness he never allowed himself in public. Of letting someone close enough to hurt me. So I hurt you first. I pushed you away before you could leave me, because leaving was inevitable. Everyone leaves. Everyone betrays. That's what I learned, and I couldn't. I wasn't going to leave you. Her voice broke on the words. I loved you. I was going to tell you about the baby as soon as your mother's treatment stabilized. I was trying to protect you from more stress, and you, she stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. You threw me away like I was nothing. I know. Do you? Do you understand what it's like to be called a manipulator when all you did was love someone? To be accused of entrapment when you were just trying to wait for the right moment? The tears were flowing freely now. I worked double shifts while pregnant. I skipped meals to pay rent. I went to free clinics because I had no insurance. And the whole time, I protected your reputation. I told no one who the father was. I let them think I was just another poor immigrant who got herself into trouble. Adiz. The doctors ran extra tests today. Standard procedure when someone's donating blood while pregnant. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, steadying herself. They confirmed the baby's blood type. AB negative. The same as me. The same as your mother. Thornton frowned, not understanding. What does that mean? It means the baby is definitely yours. The genetics prove it. There's no ambiguity, no question, no possibility that I was lying or confused or trying to trap you with someone else's child. Her voice hardened. All those accusations about manipulation, the baby's blood type proves they were lies. Your baby, Thornton. Growing inside me while you were calling me a schemer. The floor gave way beneath him. All the certainty he had felt, all the righteousness that had justified his cruelty, it collapsed in an instant. The evidence he had trusted, the accusations he had believed, the decision he had made, all of it built on a foundation of lies. The photographs. The medical records. My uncle said. Your uncle? Something shifted in Adiz's expression. Clement gave you that information? He brought me the envelope. The morning Thornton stopped, the pieces suddenly rearranging themselves in his mind. The timing. The manipulation. The way Clement had appeared at exactly the right moment with exactly the right evidence to destroy exactly the relationship that was softening Thornton's edges. He set me up. The realization was nauseating. He wanted to isolate me. To keep me dependent on him, to make sure I stayed the cold, calculating machine that was easier for him to manipulate. I don't care about your uncle. Adi's voice was flat. I don't care about boardroom politics or family power struggles. I care that you chose to believe the worst about me without even asking for my side. You're right. You're absolutely right. He stepped toward her again, and this time she didn't step back. I have no defense. I have no excuse. I made a choice, and it was wrong, and I've destroyed something I can never fully repair. She studied his face. Whatever she saw there made her pause. The doctors said something else. About the baby's blood type. What? If your mother needs more transfusions, and she probably will, I may not be available every time. I can only donate so often while pregnant. Adi's voice dropped. But in 3 months, another AB negative donor will be born. Another person who could help keep your mother alive. Understanding dawned slowly. Our baby. Your daughter. Adi's hand rested on her stomach. That's what the tests showed today. A girl. AB negative. The same rare blood type that could save your mother's life. Thornton's legs gave out. He didn't decide to fall. His body simply stopped cooperating. He collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor of the clinic waiting room, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs he couldn't control. A daughter. He had a daughter. And he had almost lost her, lost them both, because he was too damaged to recognize love when it was standing right in front of him. A nurse appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the scene. Adiz waved her off. He's fine. He just received some difficult news. The nurse hesitated, then retreated. Adiz stood over him, watching him break apart on the floor of a hospital waiting room. 6 months ago, she would have knelt beside him. Would have held him. Would have tried to put him back together. Now she just waited. I'm sorry. His voice was wrecked, barely audible. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right. You can't. Her voice was tired but not cruel. Some things can't be made right. They can only be carried. Tell me what to do. Anything. Whatever you need. I don't need anything from you. She paused. But your mother needs my blood. So I'm going to give it. And then we can talk about what comes next. If anything. She walked past him toward the donation area. At the doorway, she stopped. For what it's worth, I hope she survives. Your mother. She looked kind, in the photographs you kept in your study. A pause. She deserves better than losing her life because her son was too broken to see what was real. She disappeared around the corner. Thornton stayed on the floor. He didn't care who saw him. Didn't care about dignity or image or the armor that had protected him for so long. The armor was gone. Shattered. And what remained beneath it was a man who had destroyed everything that mattered, and who had no idea how to rebuild. The transfusion was successful. Thornton watched from the doorway of his mother's room as the blood, Adiz's blood, flowed into Vivian's veins. Within hours, the color began returning to his mother's face. Her vital signs stabilized. The doctors used words like encouraging and cautiously optimistic. Vivian woke in the late afternoon. Her eyes found Thornton immediately. You look terrible. He laughed despite himself. A broken sound, half sob. I know. What happened? So he told her. Everything. The photographs, the accusations, the firing. His refusal to listen. The months of silence while Adiz struggled alone. The baby. The blood-type revelation. Everything. When he finished, Vivian was quiet for a long moment. I raised you better than this. I know. I raised you to see people. To listen before judging. To question the sources of information before acting on them. I know, Mom. Then why didn't you do any of those things? Thornton closed his eyes. The answer was simple and devastating. Because loving her made me feel vulnerable. And I've spent my whole life making sure I never feel vulnerable. So when someone gave me a reason to push her away, I took it. I didn't question it because I didn't want to question it. Because of your father. Because of everything. The poverty. The violence. The way people looked at us when we had nothing. He paused. I built walls to survive. But I built them so high I locked out everyone who might have actually helped me. Including Adiz. Especially her. Vivian reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak but warm, and something about that simple touch broke him all over again. Then take down the walls, Thornton. Before you lose everything that matters. Before it's too late. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me. That's not your decision to make. Your decision is whether to try. Whether to show up, tell the truth, and accept whatever comes. Vivian's eyes were fierce despite her exhaustion. That's what love is. Not control. Not certainty. Just showing up, again and again, even when it's terrifying. How did you do it? The question emerged from somewhere deep. After everything with Dad, how did you stay open? How did you keep loving people when loving had brought you so much pain? By choosing to. Vivian smiled slightly. Every day. Every time it would have been easier to close down, I chose to stay open. It's not magic, Thornton. It's just practice. He found Adiz 3 days later. She had given him her address during the hospital paperwork, a requirement for follow-up regarding the donation. He shouldn't have used it for personal contact. She had made clear she wanted space. But some things couldn't wait for permission. Her building was in Pilsen, a working-class neighborhood of small apartments and corner stores and families making do with what they had. He felt out of place in his expensive car, his tailored coat. He felt exactly as out of place as he deserved to feel. She answered on the third knock. Her expression shifted from surprise to wariness to resignation. I asked you not to contact me. I know. I'm sorry. He stood on her doorstep, stripped of everything that usually protected him. No assistants, no lawyers, no prepared talking points. Just him. I'm not here to make demands or offers or arguments. I just need to tell you something. What? You were right. About everything. I was a coward. I believed lies because they were easier than truth. I hurt you in ways that can never be fully repaired. He paused, steadying himself. And I am sorry. For the accusations. For the firing. For every day you spent struggling while I sat in my penthouse convinced I was the victim. Adiz said nothing. Her hand rested on her stomach, protective. I want to be part of our daughter's life. Not as a controlling presence, not as someone who shows up with money and thinks that's enough. As a father. Whatever that looks like to you. Whatever you'll allow. Why should I trust you near my child? You shouldn't. I haven't earned that trust. I'm just asking for the chance to earn it. However long that takes. Whatever I have to do. She studied him. He forced himself to hold her gaze, to let her see what was underneath all the armor he had spent his life constructing. My mother wants to meet you, he added. When she's stronger. She said you saved her life, and she wants to thank you. And she wants to know her grandchild. Something shifted in Adi's expression. Not softening, exactly. But consideration. Your mother didn't hurt me. If she wants to meet the baby when the baby comes, I'll consider it. And me? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of everything she had survived. I don't trust you. I don't know if I'll ever trust you. But I also know our daughter deserves a chance to know her father. She paused. I'll give you one chance, Thornton. One chance to prove you've actually changed. If you retreat again, if you hide behind your walls, if you treat me or our daughter as anything less than people who deserve respect, we're done. Forever. You'll never see either of us again. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about you anymore. It's about her. Everything I do from now on is about giving her the best life possible. I understand, he repeated. And I promise I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that trust. She looked at him for another long moment. Then she stepped back from the door. There's tea inside. It's cheap and probably stale. But it's what I have. He recognized the offer for what it was. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just the smallest possible opening. It was more than he deserved. I like cheap tea, he said. He stepped inside and began the long work of rebuilding what he had destroyed. The months that followed were the hardest of his life. They didn't reconcile easily. There was too much damage, too many shattered pieces. They met in public places at first. Coffee shops, parks, neutral ground where Adiz could leave if she needed to. They talked about the baby, about logistics, about practical matters that kept emotion at arm's length. Slowly, painfully, they began to talk about other things too. Thornton told her about his childhood. The violence, the poverty, the armor he had built to survive it. He explained, not as excuse, but as context, how his father's betrayals had taught him to expect betrayal everywhere. How the wealth and power he'd accumulated had only deepened his isolation. Adiz told him about her own journey. The father she had lost too young. The grandmother who had raised her with stories and proverbs and fierce expectations. The cousin's promise that brought her to America. The years of struggle that had shaped her into someone who didn't break easily. They went to therapy, separately at first, then together. They learned to communicate without accusations, to disagree without destruction, to be vulnerable without weapons. It wasn't the romance of their first connection. No stolen nights, no passionate whispers, no fantasy of perfect union. This was something harder and slower and ultimately stronger. Something built on honesty instead of hiding. Thornton dealt with his uncle. The investigation was brief but devastating. Once he started looking, the evidence of Clement's manipulation was everywhere. Falsified reports, strategic leaks, a pattern of isolation tactics stretching back years. The board meeting where Thornton confronted him was quiet and final. Clement was stripped of his position and escorted from the building. No drama, no shouting. Just the systematic dismantling of a power structure built on lies. Thornton expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, he felt tired. Years of defending against threats, of building walls against enemies real and imagined, and for what? A larger empire? An emptier life? He started practicing wanting less. It didn't come naturally. But neither did anything else worth having. Now, before I tell you how this ends, I need you to understand something. This isn't a fairy tale. The wounds don't disappear just because people apologize. The trust doesn't rebuild just because someone says they've changed. But sometimes, not always, not easily, but sometimes, people grow. And when they grow, the impossible becomes possible. If you've been following this story, make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. Because what comes next is the reason I told you this story in the first place. Kayamika was born on a Tuesday in September. She arrived 3 weeks early, impatient to enter the world, her small lungs announcing her presence with a cry that seemed too large for her tiny body. Thornton was in the delivery room when she emerged. Adiz had agreed to let him be there, though the trust was still fragile, still being tested with every decision. He held her for the first time while Adiz rested, this impossible small person with dark eyes that seemed to look right through him. Kayamika. God is beautiful. The name Adiz had chosen, carrying her heritage forward into this new life. She has your nose, Adiz said drowsily. Same shape exactly. She's perfect. The word came out thick with emotion. I don't deserve this. No. You don't. Adiz's voice was gentle but honest. But she's here anyway. So the question is what you're going to do about it. Thornton looked at his daughter's face. The tiny fingers, the soft curve of her cheek, the absolute vulnerability of a life that now depended on him not to fail. I'm going to be better, he said. Every day. For the rest of my life. I'm going to be better. Adiz reached out and touched his hand. Just briefly. Just enough. Then start. Vivian met her granddaughter 2 weeks later. She was out of the hospital by then, recovering at home, stronger than she had been in months. The transfusions had helped. Adiz's blood, flowing through her veins, had bought her time that the doctors hadn't expected. Thornton brought Kayamika to her, placing the small bundle carefully in his mother's arms. Vivian held her grandchild with hands that trembled slightly, weakness, age, emotion all tangled together. Hello, little one, she whispered. I'm your grandmother. I've been waiting to meet you. Kayamika's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to find Vivian's face. Some ancient recognition passing between them, grandmother and grandchild, the chain of generations extending forward. She has the family blood type, Vivian said, looking up at Thornton. AB negative. Rare and stubborn and absolutely impossible to argue with. Like her grandmother. Like all the women in this family, apparently. Vivian smiled at Adiz, who was watching from the doorway. Come here, child. Let me see you properly. Adiz approached slowly. She had agreed to this visit for Vivian's sake, but the wariness was still there. Too much pain, too recently inflicted. Vivian studied her with the perception that illness had sharpened rather than dulled. You saved my life. And you gave me a grandchild. There's nothing I can do that would be adequate thanks for either of those things. She paused. But I can tell you this. My son was wrong. About everything he did and said and believed about you. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry he had to learn the hard way, and I'm sorry you suffered for his lessons. Adiz's composure wavered. Just briefly. Just enough to show what those words meant. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just help me teach him how to be human again. Vivian looked down at Kayamika. This little one is going to need a father who knows how to love. That's going to take all of us working together. Adiz nodded slowly. I'm willing to try. For her sake. That's enough. Vivian reached out and took Adiz's hand. That's more than enough. The years unfolded slowly after that. Thornton and Adiz didn't reconcile overnight. There was no dramatic moment of forgiveness, no sudden erasure of all that had happened between them. There was only the slow, patient work of rebuilding trust. Conversation by conversation, decision by decision, day by day. They co-parented first. Structured schedules, clear boundaries, careful communication. Kayamika split her time between Adiz's small apartment and the penthouse that Thornton was slowly learning to make feel like a home. They became friends eventually. Sharing meals, sharing stories, sharing the 1,000 small intimacies that come with raising a child together. The walls between them thinned, though they didn't disappear entirely. And then, 3 years after Kayamika's birth, something shifted again. It wasn't a single moment. It was an accumulation of kept promises, of genuine changes, of a man slowly becoming the person he should have been all along. Thornton had done the work. Really done it. Not performed growth, but achieved it. Adiz noticed. She couldn't help noticing. "I'm scared," she told him one night, after Kayamika was asleep and they were sitting together in Vivian's garden, watching the stars. "I'm scared to trust you again. Really trust you. Because if you hurt me again, I won't." "You can't promise that." "No." He turned to face her. "But I can promise to keep trying. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when my old instincts tell me to run and hide and build walls." He paused. "I can promise that you and Chia are more important to me than my fear. That's not the same as promising you won't hurt me." "You're right. It's not." He reached out and took her hand. "I guess what I'm really promising is that I'll stay. No matter what. Even when I mess up, because I will mess up, I know that, I'll stay and work through it instead of running." Adiz looked at their joined hands. At this man who had destroyed her, who had rebuilt himself, who was still imperfect but was finally trying to be better. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay? Okay, I'll try. Really try. Not just for Chia's sake. For us." Thornton pulled her closer. She let him. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. Something earned. They were married the following spring. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, held in Vivian's garden among the flowers she had planted when she was strong enough to garden again. Kayamika was the flower girl, scattering petals with 4-year-old enthusiasm while her grandmother watched with tears streaming down her face. Vivian's health had stabilized over the years. The transfusions continued, the treatments evolved, and somehow, against all odds, she persisted. The doctors called it remarkable. Vivian called it stubbornness. "I'm not dying before I see my grandchild grow up," she had told them. "So you might as well stop telling me about statistics." She held on. Year after year. Not just surviving but living, planting gardens, spoiling Kayamika, teaching Thornton the lessons about love and vulnerability that he should have learned decades ago. Kayamika was 8 years old when Vivian finally let go. It happened gently, in her sleep, surrounded by family. She had spent her last conscious hours holding her granddaughter's hand, telling her stories about their ancestors, about the women in their family who had survived impossible things and come out stronger. "Your blood is my blood," she had whispered. Literally. "We share the same rare type, you and I. That means we're connected in ways most people never are. You carry a piece of me forward. I don't want you to go, Grandma. I know, sweetheart. But I'll still be here. In your blood. In your stories. In everything you do that makes you strong and stubborn and impossible to argue with." Vivian smiled. "That's the family curse. We never really leave." She closed her eyes that night and didn't open them again. The funeral was larger than Vivian had wanted. She had requested a small gathering, but too many people had been touched by her life to honor that wish. Thornton spoke, though it took him 3 attempts to get through the words without breaking. "My mother taught me that walls protect but they also imprison. That love matters more than safety. That the people we lose don't disappear, they become part of who we are, if we let them." He looked at Adiz, at Kayamika, at the life he had almost destroyed and somehow been given a chance to save. "She was the only person who ever believed in me when I had nothing. And she kept believing, even when I gave her every reason to stop." He couldn't say more. Adiz took his hand and led him back to his seat, where Kayamika climbed into his lap and held on tight. 10 years after Vivian's death, people still asked Thornton how he had changed. How had the ruthless billionaire become the philanthropist everyone now admired? How had the man who fired his pregnant maid become the husband who built nursing schools in her mother's name? How had the closed-off machine become the father who coached his daughter's soccer team and cried openly at her school plays? He always told the same story. I fired a pregnant woman without looking at her face. 6 months later, I found out she was carrying the only blood type that could save my mother's life. And my daughter. What happened then? I collapsed. He would smile slightly, remembering. Literally. On the floor of a hospital waiting room. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had built my life on, it fell apart in 30 seconds. That sounds terrifying. It was. But it was also the beginning of everything good that came after. He would pause, thinking about how to explain what he had learned. I spent 40 years building walls to protect myself. And in the end, those walls almost cost me everything that mattered. My mother. My daughter. The woman I love. All of it almost slipped away because I was too afraid to be vulnerable. So what changed? I stopped choosing fear. The answer was simple because the truth was simple. I started choosing love instead. Every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's all change really is, a choice you keep making until it becomes who you are. Kayamika was 18 when she gave her first blood donation. It was voluntary. She was old enough now to make her own choices about her body, about how to use the rare type she had inherited from her grandmother and mother. She chose to donate because she understood what her blood meant. The lives it could save. The legacy it carried. Thornton and Adiz watched from the waiting room as their daughter rolled up her sleeve and let the needle slide in. She's going to change the world, Adiz said quietly. I can feel it. She already has. Thornton took his wife's hand. She changed mine. They sat together in comfortable silence while their daughter gave something precious to strangers who needed it. And Thornton thought about Vivian. About the walls he had built and the years he had wasted behind them. About the moment in the hospital waiting room when everything had collapsed, and the slow, painful, miraculous rebuilding that had followed. He thought about all the things he almost lost. All the things he was grateful to have. He thought about his mother's final words to him, whispered in the garden 3 days before she died. You learned, she had said. That's all I ever wanted. For you to learn that love is worth the risk. That connection is worth the pain. That being human, really, fully human, means letting yourself be vulnerable to other people. What if I had never learned, he had asked. What if I had stayed behind the walls forever? Vivian had smiled. The smile of someone who had already made peace with every version of what might have been. Then you would have missed all of this. The joy and the pain and the love and the loss. You would have been safe, and you would have been alone, and you would have died wondering what living actually felt like. Is that what Dad did? Your father never found someone brave enough to break down his walls. Or maybe he did, and he didn't recognize her until too late. Vivian had squeezed his hand. You were lucky, Thornton. You found someone who saw through your armor. Who stayed even when you pushed her away. Who gave you a chance you didn't deserve. I know. Don't ever forget it. Don't ever take it for granted. The love of a good woman, the love of your daughter, that's not something you earn once and then coast on forever. It's something you have to deserve, every single day. I won't forget. Good. Vivian had closed her eyes, tired from even that brief conversation. Now go be with your family. That's where you belong. He belonged there still. Watching his daughter give blood to save strangers. Holding his wife's hand in a hospital waiting room. Living the life he had almost thrown away, that he had been given a second chance to build. The walls were gone now. Completely. He didn't need them anymore. He had something better. He had love. Imperfect, complicated, hard-won love. The kind that doesn't come easy, that has to be chosen again and again, that requires courage and vulnerability and the willingness to fail and try again. It wasn't the fairy tale he had been afraid of. It was something better. Something real. And it had started with a collapse. A shattering. A moment when everything he thought he knew had fallen apart, and something true had finally had room to grow. That was the story he told when people asked. That was the life he lived when no one was watching. That was the man he had become, not despite his failures, but because he had finally let them teach him what mattered. Some nights, when the house was quiet and his family was asleep, Thornton would stand at the window of the home he shared with Adiz, not the cold penthouse anymore, but a real house with a garden like Vivian's, filled with noise and life and all the messy complications of a family that loved each other. He would look out at the city and remember who he used to be. The man who fired his pregnant maid without looking at her face. The man who believed lies because truth was too frightening. The man who chose walls over connection, safety over love, armor over vulnerability. That man was gone now. Not erased, you couldn't erase the past, couldn't pretend the damage had never happened. But transformed. Rebuilt. Made into something different through the slow, painful work of change. Adiz would sometimes find him there, standing at the window in the dark. "What are you thinking about?" she would ask. "How close I came to missing all of this." She would wrap her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his shoulder. "But you didn't miss it. You're here. Because you gave me a chance I didn't deserve. I gave you one chance. You did something with it." She would kiss his shoulder. "That part was you." They would stand together in the darkness, looking out at a world full of people building walls, people choosing fear, people protecting themselves from the very connections that could save them. And Thornton would think about his mother's words. About love being a choice you make every day. About walls protecting but also imprisoning. About the courage it takes to let yourself be vulnerable. He had been given a gift. Not the wealth, not the empire, not the power that had once defined him. The gift was simpler and more profound. He had been given the chance to learn. And he had learned. That was enough. That was everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the walls you've built in your own life, I want you to do something. Not subscribe. Not like. Those things matter, but they're not what I'm asking for right now. I want you to think about someone you've pushed away. Someone you've hurt because you were scared of being hurt first. Someone who deserved better than the version of yourself you gave them. And if it's not too late, if there's still time, reach out. Apologize. Give them the truth you were too afraid to offer before. Because that's what this story is really about. Not billionaires or maids or rare blood types. It's about the choice to stay open when everything in you wants to close down. The courage to be vulnerable when vulnerability feels like weakness. The understanding that love, real love, imperfect love, hard-won love, is worth every risk. Thornton Graves learned that lesson almost too late. Don't wait as long as he did. This has been Billionaire Stories with Mr. Lawson. Thank you for listening. And thank you for letting me share this story with you. Until next time.